The Resident Evil 3 remake is a great game, but it's flawed and fails to live up to the high standard of quality set by the Resident Evil 2 remake. While there are a plethora of comparisons, pros, cons, reasons I can talk about for why this is the case, the topic of this video is a very specific point that I feel like encapsulates these two games' differences quite well, and that is Mr. X and Nemesis. When the RE3 remake became official, like official, my mind started racing. I was on a one-way trip aboard the hype train ready to get Falcon punched, burned to a crisp, blown up, and most importantly, shit my pants. Mostly because I wanted more RE2, but also because of all the creative possibilities Nemesis could bring to the table. While it certainly is more Resident Evil 2, Nemesis leaves a lot to be desired. I love his design, and the designs for his evolved forms, and encountering him during the game's opening is certainly intense, but every encounter after that loses something, mostly due to them being entirely scripted, and they just feel more like a test of patience rather than skill or bravery. Granted, it's not written down in Moses' fancy stone slabs that he's gonna pile drive your ass once you reach the corner of this police car at precisely 2 hours 53 seconds through the game, but there's not really that much wiggle room. And I'm not talking about a room that just plays fruit salad on repeat. Maybe you just juked out Nemesis and broke his ankles, leaving him defenseless on the other side of a gate. Kinda like that one time Kanye West beat that handicapped basketball team. Nemesis is just gonna jump right over every single time, nothing different. So how about this? You enter a building, and the AI for Nemesis registers that he cannot go into that building. He's just gonna stand outside and wait for you to come out like a psycho ex-girlfriend. I was hoping Capcom would make him way more dynamic and have like free will to choose what he does and when, but honestly, it does not feel like that whatsoever. Oh, maybe during certain sections of the game, he would switch off between, not having weapons at all, using a rocket launcher, using a flamethrower. No, what he uses is completely scripted, and he only uses his weapons during certain chasing sections, which, if I'm honest, they're pretty stinky. Maybe he would break down doors or walls at random in order to get around you. No, he doesn't. And it's not that his AI is bad, it's just standard game enemy AI, which, sure, it works, but it could have been so much better. Nemesis in this game could have pushed the envelope for game AI so much further, and it just comes off as a missed opportunity. Now, for transparency's sake, I never played the original RE3. I know, fake gamer alert. But from what I understand from people I know that have played the game or people online talking about it, the Nemesis chases in the original still gave you a good amount of freedom over the remake, mainly because you still had options as to whether you wanted to just simply run from them or to take them down. And if you took them down, you would actually get rewarded with some pretty sweet sounding weapons. Now, you can down Nemesis in the remake, it's very similar to how you could down Mr. X in RE2, but he only dropped something for me like the first time I did it, and it was just a weapon attachment, which was welcome at the time, but compared to like a rocket launcher or something, it's kind of the short end of the stick here. When you would down Mr. X, he was down for a fairly decent amount of time, definitely enough for you to run away, but Nemesis gets up pretty fucking quickly, almost to where you question if it was even worth it or not, and honestly, it's really not. From my understanding, the original, if you killed him, he didn't show up again until like his next scripted sequence. And yes, you could definitely look at my complaints with Nemesis and point out that my own hype and imagination outdid the developers, and maybe I shouldn't chastise them too hard for not living up to the visions of masochistic grandeur I created in my own head, which is certainly a fair point, if they didn't execute a similar concept as with Nemesis, but did it better in the previous game with Mr. X. Mr. X lit the Resi fanbase on fire, and the flames were nearly as hot as they were in Australia. Not only because he functioned as an evil mascot for one of the best games in a long-running and beloved series, but also for the fact that there was so much effort put into him, and perhaps more importantly, he managed to be frightening. His introduction has been engraved in my brain since my first playthrough of the game. While the very first glimpse of him is his hand busting through a concrete wall to smashing a guy's head like a melon. His real introduction isn't much further in, and it's just him simply shoving half of a helicopter out of the way like it's nothing, and then nonchalantly walking over to you. It terrified me. Granted, Nemesis does get the more cinematic and drawn-out intro, which also manages to not overstay its welcome. Something they both achieve really, really well is setting the tone for their individual games. And I vastly prefer the tone of 2. When Mr. X sent sheer terror throughout me and kicked my brain to an adrenaline rush, he made me want to go and hide and cower in fear like the scared little baby that I was. When Nemesis popped up on my screen, he usually just got me ready for a big budget action romp where big Tane makes even bigger Tane go, which honestly isn't a bad thing. Hell, Resident Evil took a more action-focused approach before, for a good while too, and I didn't hate that. But it just so happens I enjoy the more horror-focused entries a lot more. In terms of overall basic function, Mr. X isn't all that different from Nemesis. He sees you, chases you, you involuntarily turn in his MMA sparring partner, smoke some green, rinse, lather, repeat. Where their differences do become more notable is in their AI and how they interact with the game world. When Mr. X is around, he's constantly searching for you. He may be on the complete opposite wing of the police department, but you can still hear him stomp around his brand spanking new romper stompers. You'll see him open and shut doors looking for you like a lost little puppy. It really adds to the immersion of the game and makes him even more frightening. Genesis, on the other hand, is only around when the game tells him to be. Sure, they'll do little tricks to make him appear more like Mr. X, but I saw through the smoke pretty quickly, and it really dampened my enjoyment of the game. I only noticed little nuances with Nemesis AI like that when he was already after me. I never managed to outrun him, and then when I'm away down the stairs to the cafe, then noticed I was behind him and he was walking into the cafe. He's either on me or he's not. Nemesis does have some pretty sick jumps though, which is something he has over old Xy Boy. And don't get me started on all of the amazing mods out there that change Mr. X. There's so many good ones. Want to change every enemy in the game to Mr. X because you hate your life and everything in it? Here's a mod for that. Ever looked at Mr. X and thought, boy oh boy, I sure wonder what he's packing under that trench coat? Well, download this mod that strips him down to a Speedo, because of fucking course you want to stare at his dick while he punches you in the face. My personal favorite, however, is the one where it turns him into an itsy bitsy little fella, but is still able to bitch slap your ass into next week. Now, I'm sure loads of memey and creative mods for Nemesis will become available sooner or later, but as of recording, I don't really have any knowledge of them. And I don't think that's really only because Resident Evil 2 has been out longer. Some of those Mr. X mods were out super fucking quickly, namely the one that turned him into Thomas the Tank Engine or Shrek. For me, when I see a fan base turn out a bunch of amazing mods, especially meme ones, it's a sign that there's a lot of passion in the fan base towards this game. And I've been seeing a lot more passion towards the Resident Evil 2 remake than the Resident Evil 3 remake. Now, don't get it twisted. I'm not saying the RE3 remake is shit. Not saying Nemesis's implementation in it is shitty. I just feel like he's disappointing compared to what Capcom have done in the past and what they could have done with him. Reducing Nemesis to essentially a multi-counter cent piece is not the direction they should have gone with. But it's what we got. And who knows, maybe someone will make a mod out there that'll actually make Nemesis live up to all the hype and ideas. Only time will tell. Also, Capcom, don't remake Resident Evil 4. There's no need. That game still plays great even today. What you should remake is Code Veronica, because that game needs it a lot more. Sincerely, some random dweeb that cares way too much about video games.
Oh yeah, that felt good. Don't worry, Claire. Your knight in shining armor is here.